States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Good evening, everyone. In accordance with the requirements of the open meeting law, please be advised that this meeting is being recorded and broadcast over the Lunenburg Public Access Channel. I'd like to welcome our newest selectman, Mrs. Katie Adams, to the board. Congratulations on your election win. I have a few announcements. I have a letter here from the fire chief. Dear Chairman Toll, in honor of Emergency Medical Services Week, beginning May 22nd through May 26th, 2018, we would like to honor all of our hardworking and dedicated EMS personnel who work tirelessly throughout the year to assist the citizens of Lunenburg. EMS is an ever-changing profession in which education is an essential part. These diligent EMTs continue to educate themselves far beyond their initial certification. Several of our past EMS members have gone on to become doctors, physician assistants, nurses, and medical directors of other EMS services. We'd like to honor all of our EMS personnel on this 2018 EMS Week. Thank you. Patrick Sullivan, Chief of the Fire Department. In addition, the Lunenburg Fire and Police Department will be holding the annual memorial service on Sunday, June 10th at 8:30 a.m. at the Public Safety Complex. It's a very nice service. It's on a Sunday morning at 8:30 at the Public Safety Building, and unfortunately, it's not very well attended. So please come if you have some time. It's a very good service, and that's an invitation to all of the board as well. A couple other activities going on. Memorial Day this coming Monday at 10 a.m. There'll be an observance at the Veterans Park across from the Senior Center at 10 a.m. That's this Monday at 10 a.m. Rain or shine, if it rains, we might have to move into this, the Eagle House. Cruise Night, and you'll hear more about these, but Cruise Night is June 6th. The Arts Festival is June 9th, and there is a charity basketball game with the police department as a fundraiser for defibrillators. That's June 14th. Is there any public comment from the board? Ms. Adams.
Okay, I just wanted to thank everybody who participated in the election, but especially Dave Passios and Michael Ray Jeffries. I think that a healthy democracy has contested elections, and so there's always going to be somebody who ends up here and somebody who doesn't, and then there's a chance every year, and so it was a good process, and thank you to everyone. But also this morning I attended the ribbon cutting for the Wallace Park Playground, and that was it's a beautiful playground, and it was a collaboration of the community and the town, and it's a beautiful spot. They had it at 7:15 so that the kids could all meet before the school bus came to pick them up, and it was a really nice morning. So.
Great. Is there any public comment from the public? Mr. Burney.
Good evening, Adam Burney, Land Use Director. Two very quick things. The first is, as you may or may not be aware, the Stormwater Task Force is putting together a grant application for the 319 grant program, which preserves watersheds, and they'll be asking the Board of Selectmen for a letter of support in submitting this grant. The project will be the installation of 9 best management practices at 5 locations in the Upper Mulpus watershed area. So that would be north and west of Hickory Hills Lake. The idea is to preserve the healthy watershed that exists there. Currently that area is less than 6% impervious, and these would help reduce the pollutant loading into the Upper Mulpus and to cool the water down to prevent the erosion of the cold water fishery. So I'm going to formally request that your next meeting that the board undertake this request, and I'll submit supporting documentation for you to read about that program. And the second is on the 25th of June at their regularly scheduled meeting. The planning board would like to hear from opponents, proponents, people who are confused about adult use marijuana and the implication and regulations that will be going forward. As you're aware, we currently have a moratorium in place that goes through the 1st of December this year. And at that point, we'll need to have some zoning regulations or some manner of general bylaw that prohibits it, and there's a whole process for what we would need to do either of those. So the board will lay out some of those processes and sort of try to take input from the public on what sort of things they would like to see regulated, what sort of things concern them, and what places they may want to either exclude these uses from or allow these uses in, to give them a basis to start moving their planning process forward.
What time will that be on the?
The meeting starts at 6:30, so it would be on the front end of that meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment from the public? Mr. Alonso.
Tom Alonso, 284 Lancaster Avenue. One day I'm going to actually extend this. Just a couple things. First, the election. I want to welcome Mrs. Adams to the board and congratulate her on her win on Saturday. I know you look forward to this, and I hope it's as a rewarding experience as it was for me. It really is a good honor, so congratulations. I also want to thank, as she did, echo her comments about the other two candidates for Board of Selectmen who actually had to run a campaign, and it is a lot of energy. For those who don't know, who have not run one, it's a lot of energy, a lot of planning, a lot of time away from family and everything, and so I want to thank all the three who ran those kind of campaigns for their dedication to service to the town. And lastly, everybody who put their name up, contested election or not, I want to thank them for putting their names forward and for their various boards, commissions, and committees that they were elected to. One other comment about the election: I think it is very healthy to have contested elections. I totally agree. And while I was heartened that the turnout was double what it was last year, put it in perspective, it's still 16% of the vote. So it was really kind of disheartening again to get people to participate in the process. 16% at the electorate to place a vote that takes 5 minutes. And then, of course, you look at town meeting, which is probably attended by 7% of the electorate. So I don't know what we need to get people involved. I know lots of people have been trying for many years. I hope we can succeed. Lastly, there was one thing that happened at town meeting, and I wanted to at least remind the board. There was one gentleman who got up when we were discussing the primary school, and he was in a butter and gave everybody a good indication of what he has to look at every day, and that struck a chord with me. And I hope that the board, it doesn't take a lot of money to clear up the back of that lot, and I hope we're going to work with the DPW and with the abutters so that they don't have to look at that. There really is no necessity for that. So I hope this board and the town as a whole takes that into consideration, that this gentleman and probably other people who abut it look at that every day. So hopefully that can get taken care of soon. Just remove the bramble and the old playground equipment, etc. Thank you.
Thank you. All righty. First order of business is 7:05 appointment, the Lunenburg Boys and Girls Club, request for toll booth fundraiser on June 9th. Mr. Alonso.
Should have stayed up here. So this is our annual, we do 2 voluntary tolls a year, one in the spring and then one at the end of the summer, beginning of the fall, the cusp of that. And this is the spring one for June 9th from 10 to 2, only at the town center at the intersection of Lancaster and 2A. We have checked with the chiefs as always. Everybody will be will be over 18. We'll have signed the waivers. We'll be wearing reflective vests. I also want to add, it was brought to our attention that the town fair, well, not the Lunenburg Arts Festival is that day, and we were asked, and we did check with the woman organizing that, because that's on Memorial Drive. She didn't have any issue with that, so we just want to let the board know that we did check with them beforehand, not to impede on what they were doing and hopefully not have any backlogs of traffic going into there.
The other thing that has been suggested to add, you'll give a little flyer to somebody and let them know. They can put it on the dash if they go back and forth so they can say they've already donated without having to stop or anything.
We generally do that, and I think there was one time in the last couple of years we didn't, but I will remind them and we will make sure that we have those things to put out on people's dash, yes.
I would make a motion, we approve the toll booth boot drive request for June 9th from 10 a.m. 2 p.m. in the center of town.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
On
Okay,
behalf of the Boys and Girls Club, thank you, and thank everybody for their support.
thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, our 7:10 appointment is an update on the LED streetlight conversion from the Green Communities Task Force, and I think they have a presentation, so we need to hook that
I'm
up.
not familiar with that part. How do I do this? I just, do I just plug in there or?
Yeah, there's a cord down there. That,
Yeah, no, I'm all set there, but I just,
I don't think the public has to stop it.
oh, it goes in there? Okay. So do I turn off the in focus then? Or do I do that? Okay, yeah. Sorry. Okay. Dave Blatt, 411 Goodrich Street, Chair of the Lunenburg Green Group, type of thing. First, I want to just give the board a quick update that what we've been doing is basically we are waiting now to hear from our next grant proposal. We did this was basically the grant this year is based on how good your project is. So we have the projects this year are concentrating on this building, Town Hall, the Ritter, and the police and fire department. So we're looking to try to do things for all three buildings this time. We're hoping for about $160,000 for upgrades to these buildings. However, I'm here to talk to you about the LED streetlights, and we've been doing a lot of investigation, contacted Unitil, and wanted to give you guys a quick idea of what we're up against and what we're doing. I don't do well when I can't walk around, so I'll do it this way. Okay, so I think you guys have a copy in front of you, but what you have in front, what you're seeing on here in this slide is on the top category is what we're doing today. So today we are paying approximately $70,000 a year for our use of the streetlights. And I'm going to use the term use of. So this is comprised, the way they come about that is it's comprised of a luminaire charge. This is for the bulbs and the maintenance of the bulbs. There is a delivery charge, an electricity charge for each one. So you can see the total estimated annual charge is going to be the cost of all of those things. So what I've done is in the estimated annual bill for just the electricity, I looked at just the delivery charge, the basic service, and that's how much each light is going for. So if you look at it, if you come down that column, you're looking at about $50,000 a year for the lights and the maintenance of those lights today. Okay? The bottom section is their proposal for LEDs. So they're talking about the LED lights they're going to do. You can see by the number in front of the W, that's how much power the new LED lights are using versus the old ones. You look at now they're telling us the total estimated annual charge will only be $40,615. This is a savings of approximately $30,000 a year on letting them do it, and that's how much we would save. If I look at those numbers and I take out the delivery charge, the basic service charge, so in other words, I take the luminaire charge out of it, now with the new LED lights, we're paying about approximately $8,000 a year for just the electricity. So this is over a 50%, roughly a 60% savings in electricity alone just by moving to LED lights. So their proposal now is, option 2 is what they're proposing is it's going to cost us to buy our streetlights. And I apologize, I should have had this for you guys earlier, but this number changed just recently. So this is a moving target. It was $81,000 and $808.79 a couple of weeks ago, and I guess we changed to streetlight, so now it's $84,200. They're estimating about $45,000 for the police detail, for them to change the lights to LEDs. However, they're giving us the lights for free, so therefore the final charge is $129,200. If you look at this and we look at the $30,000 a year savings, it looks like that would be about a 4.34 years for the payback to let Unitil do this, okay? So we decided to say, okay, what about somebody else? And I apologize for the eye chart here. So what we've done is I contacted a company that specializes in towns and the streetlights and the changing of the streetlights. There are several things I couldn't get exactly because I'm still waiting for Unitil to give me numbers. However, there is the first few columns are what matter. This is a constant cost, so this is assuming that no price increase. Unitil will never raise the price of electricity in their lifetime, but I wanted to give you a quick snapshot that way. So, we talked about it earlier, $8,140. The maintenance cost is for this private company to do the maintenance. We feel that maintenance cost can drop substantially. However, I'm just putting a number there to give you the high side of what we feel, okay? The annual cost is the maintenance cost plus the electricity. The total cost for the town for the system is based on, if you look on the bottom, it says cost of buying the lights, $84,200. Cost of these guys installing the lights was about $157,000. The police detail is another $45,000. And then one of the things this company said was, well, if you have to replace an arm, it's going to cost you $500 an arm. So we made an assumption that 10% of the arms in town are bad. And so therefore we did a contingency of $83,750. So I tried to give like a worst case scenario. So that came to a whooping $380,000, okay, for this. So if you look down, let's go all the way over to the important stuff. We have 2 columns all the way to the left. 3 columns here. The cost to do nothing, after 20 years, we would have paid $1.4 million in electricity, and for the lights, and for the maintenance on the lights. If we let Unitil do it, we will save $466,000 over 20 years. And as you can see up here, the cost to pay back is about 4.3 years. If we buy the lights ourselves, it's going to be a little over 6 years for the payback, but here we already have $781,000 in savings. So yes, it's going to be more money to buy the lights. However, the overall savings over the years is substantially more. So obviously, we all know that the idea of Unitil keeping the prices, I shouldn't say that. The idea of the price of electricity staying the same for the next 20 years is not there, as well as the maintenance cost and other things. So I went ahead and made some assumptions here. So Unitil, whenever they do these things, they tell us that there's a 1% increase per year for electricity. The maintenance cost, we signed 3-year contracts, and I based the maintenance cost going up 2.5% every 3 years. I looked at the basic cost of lights, and I looked at it, and there we looked at about a 4% increase on the cost of the bulbs each year. So the maintenance didn't include the bulbs that you have to replace, but it gets a little confusing, but please bear with me. The bulb cost, I don't really believe that's going up. I believe that the cost of LED bulbs are going to go down. And in fact, I'd say in 10 years, there's probably going to be new technology, but anyway, going down. So if you add everything else, we're going to go back down and we're going to look, and we look here, and let's just go back to the basic thing. The cost to do nothing, we're up at $1.55 million to do nothing that we would have paid for electricity as we do nothing today. If we go with the Unitil proposal, we save $526,000 over 20 years. If we buy it ourselves, we save almost $1.3 million over 20 years. So, give or take, you can take whatever you want. Now, understand on some of these costs I'm missing. So Unitil has an additional cost for turning off the lights or other things like that during the idea of a third party installing the lights. There's also the cost of, if we have to change another light bulb and things like that, the cost from Unitil to buy them is going to go up. But as a safe estimate, I wanted to present to you guys and get you an idea of roughly what we think as a group, what we've found. Now, granted, this is only one proposal. Obviously, we'd look to it's only one estimate. We'd look to get more companies to give us estimates, make it a little bit more competitive. But I looked at this as kind of if we did it today, this is what we'd be looking at. Is over 20 years, it's about a $1.3 million savings on this, just alone. So did a lot, a lot there, but, I guess I would ask if there's any questions.
My question is, what is the capital investment to the town to buy all this, and when does it have to happen?
So the capital investment, is basically, is going to be that $379,787. So $380,000. If you were to buy the lights. If you were to just buy if you want to buy the lights from Unitil and have them install lights, it's going to be $129,200. Those two numbers.
Okay.
So either way, and by the way, on that $379,737, I did not get the estimate from Unitil of the energy savings, the rebates we get for those LED bulbs either. So we'd actually supposed to get some kind of a rebate from them, but they couldn't give me a number because it wasn't their bulbs at the time.
So,
Dave, I understood from John DiNapoli that it would be the cost of the poles as well, and not just the arms.
Well, I'm sorry.
The poles.
So my understanding is that Unitil doesn't actually own the poles. It's AT&T for the poles. So then that's one of the Verizon. Okay.
No, Unitil purchased the poles.
They did.
Yep.
So I asked him about that, and he did not give me an idea on that one.
Okay.
So that obviously they gave us this number of $129,200 to purchase the lights.
that doesn't make sense that we'd have to buy the poles if they've got wires on the poles.
That's what I was told by Mr. DiNapoli.
Okay. That's completely different than anything's ever been talking about before, so.
Agree, and I would look at it, maybe there is a rental charge for the poles, or I should say a lease charge, but I can't see there being buying the poles.
I wouldn't want to own the poles.
Also on here, it's about if you would wanted to add additional streetlights, so if there was more streetlights you wanted to add in certain sections, it's about $1,500 a light for the arm, the light, and things of that sort mounted to another pole. But that's a different story that I'm not here to talk about today.
The bottom line, it makes more sense that we buy it. At one point, the concern was, were we going to have town employees do it, but they aren't trained in climbing the poles or anything else like that. And so the fact that there's specialty companies out there that are doing that, I'm tending to that we would need to buy it. That would mean we'd probably have to borrow the money at a special town meeting, and then there'd be the payback, certainly at that part.
May I ask
We
a
should
question?
try to save as much money as we possibly can.
And that's why, as the Green Group, we're not here we weren't like making our idea of what to do. I wanted to just outline the facts to you guys.
So this is doing the entire town. Could it be done in phases? So that,
It could be done in phases, but most of the proposal we've got has been to just do it. So the idea was it would be more difficult if you were going to try to purchase certain lights from Unitil, because it'll be a moving target as to what the cost would be and things of that sort. So they felt it was easier that once I have a crew rolled out to be doing the lights, to just continue around town to do it. I think he was like 3 weeks to change all of the lights in town, was the estimate that I remember.
That's fast.
I understand, but, I don't know what they're proposing. I guess that's a lot of police detail.
Right.
So they don't want to pay for the police detail. So, obviously there's variables here. So like I say, the variables is maintenance cost. This is a third-party company contracting somebody local to do the maintenance. It's something that we could always look into ourselves. I agree with you that I'm not looking for the town to have responsibility of teaching somebody how to change the bulbs on here. I look at it as, maybe we have a third contract, a third-party contract that we could work out or something to that effect. But there's some variables here, but either way, the numbers, I want to present the numbers in front of you.
I'm just interested where we find the money. I think what
Right.
Bob said, we'd have to go to town meeting and ask for it, would probably be what we'd have to do, because I don't see the capital plan having money kicking around to do it personally.
I guess I could somewhat simplify down to, they've made proposals with and without police details. I don't think you do something like this without a police detail, so I think that's a kind of a silly proposal on their part.
No, they were going to have us pay for it.
No, I understand.
There was still going to be special details.
Right.
They figured we had a negotiated rate with the police department for the detail. I don't know. Yeah.
I think the decision has to be laid out in a lease versus buy discussion, and it's clearly just, future value of money based on whether we lease it or buy it, and if we determine to buy it and there's a capital expense, that's something that I agree has to go through at least the capital planning process, if not town meeting.
That's true. You could lease it without having to have the town put out the money.
Right.
And as this is only one proposal, I would look, if as the board decided that they would want to pursue this further, I would obviously look for more companies to give us proposals and to look at how we can reduce cost even further on this thing.
And clearly, with the town manager's comment about whether we have to buy the poles or not, I think there's additional work needs to be done on that. But I thank you for doing the work on all the different things. I
thank my group. They're a good group. They're a good, small but good group. I must say.
I don't think we have a decision to make tonight.
No.
But, right. Okay.
This, obviously, next town meeting's what, November, a while off? So it was just more for you guys to have for, as you start thinking about when you had that extra $300,000 laying around, $380,000 laying around that you would, might want to think about us. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you.
Other questions? No, okay.
Okay, our 7:20 appointment is meeting with the Land Use Director, DPW Director, with regard to the Flat Hill Road water drainage concern. And I think you have a presentation as well, is that correct?
Very short presentation.
Okay.
Almost as short as this.
Look at that, it works tonight. So, as you're all aware, we're here to talk about Flat Hills drainage. This came up maybe 6 weeks ago. It came up about 8 years ago, but we really started talking about it again 6 weeks ago or so. So what's the problem? This is Flat Hill Road running north to south. Unfortunately, I forgot the laser pointer tonight, but that yellow line bisecting the photograph is Flat Hill Road. You see that little curly road about the center of the photograph on the left-hand side? That's Cortlandt Circle. You'll see a series of purple dots up and down and all around. Those are outfalls, which is where a stormwater drainage system discharges water. So what's the issue? The issue is there's excessive water in the western gutter line of Flat Hill Road. So we have a consistent problem with a, large volume of water running through the gutter line. That is hitting a cross culvert, which is that really purple spot next to the big green field, about 2/3 of the way down in the center. That cross culvert goes under Flat Hill Road, and it conveys the water from the west side of the road to the east side of the road. And it then continues to travel down the pitch of Flat Hill and Flat Hill Road to the south and continues to deluge the east side of the road with water, impacting the large farm field and the house to the south and impacting their frontage and potentially the front ends of their lots. So, that's really where we're at. This has been, again, going on, my understanding is somewhere between 8 and 12 years. So this is a little bit up close look at the impacted area. You'll see the southern intersection of Cortlandt Circle and Flat Hill Road at the top. You'll notice the two purple dots just to the south and west of that intersection. That is a detention basin for the village at Flat Hill. It's a private drainage system that contains the water from Cortlandt Circle. There's another equivalent basin up at the intersection of Cortlandt Circle. Again, you'll notice that it's north of the cross culvert. And if we go back, you'll notice that as Cortlandt Circle circles around, on the other intersection on the southwest, there's also another drainage basin, and there's a series of lots between Cortlandt Circle, which will become important in a minute. And then we have a series of very short videos. So this here shows the water flowing off of a piece of private property on a sunny day in the winter with the snow melt onto Flat Hill Road. It continues into the gutter line of Flat Hill Road. Oh, didn't like that one, okay. So again, more running down the side of the road. This is the flow that we're recognizing is causing the problem on both sides of the road. It's probably worse in wetter times. These happen to be the videos that we have at this time. And what it really appears is that we have a water problem where private properties are conveying a significant amount of water from as of now, undetermined source. It could be groundwater, it could be perched water tables, it could be a spring, it could be private drainage systems. Onto Flat Hill Road, it's being conveyed through the roadway, and then it's impacting other private properties. So that's essentially where we are. The planning board has reviewed their records, and the village of Flat Hill was approved in the mid-90s and has I believe that number is 4 detention basins, within it 2 of which are adjacent to Flat Hill Road. They appear to be lacking some maintenance. It would be hard to pin any of this additional water on those basins specifically. Could they be contributing? Possibly. I don't think that, and the evidence we have doesn't certainly say that they're the only contributor if they are a contributor. So at this point, I don't know if the DPW director wants to comment on what he's found, but it seems that we have private property discharging water into the public way being conveyed to other private property. It doesn't appear to be storm water from a rain event specifically. It could be secondary to a rain event, overland flow or otherwise. I'd be happy to answer any questions that I can.
Do you want to talk about the letter that the building inspector and you?
We have not
signed?
issued the letter yet, but again, it would be looking to discuss with or notify the association at the village at Flat Hill that there is a requirement of the approval of that development that the drainage system be maintained. It certainly appears that there's a lack of maintenance, and we're looking for them to either provide evidence that they have been maintaining or provide a plan and schedule for that maintenance. I didn't trudge up into the woods. If you're familiar with the village at Flat Hill, it's a very large parcel. It's one of our few planned residential areas, and you'll notice the concentrated development in the front. And that very large, in the middle of the picture on the left, there's a very large tract of land that is their common open space. On the southern side and the northern side of that, closest to the development, there are 2 detention basins. I didn't identify what those look like. They also outfall to the rear of the property, not to the front of the property. The 2 adjacent to Flat Hill certainly aren't, well, I'm not an engineer, so I'm not going to say they're not functional, but they certainly appear to have a large amount of vegetation in the basin. They appear that the bottom has some significant siltation in it, and it appears there's some woody vegetation around the banks of it, which are all pretty telltale signs of a long-term lack of maintenance. this is, it sounds tragic and it sounds like a critical failure. It's really not uncommon. There are probably detention basins at various places in this state that have been in for 50 years and at this point have, 24-inch trees growing in the middle of them, and no one has really said anything. I don't think that the maintenance is a major issue outside of potentially getting a machine into the basin and ensuring that the bottom of it is at the correct elevation. But again, we say it hasn't been maintained. I don't think that they're an anomaly in town in not maintaining their basins. This one just happens to be adjacent to an area that's suffering some additional water problems.
So you say that this letter hasn't been sent yet. What's the game plan?
The game plan is we wanted to review it with council, which we have done. The building inspector will be in tomorrow. We'll probably sign it and mail it off tomorrow. The records for the village at Flat Hill are extensive and old, so we wanted to make sure that we went through them in a way. Currently, when a development like that would be approved, their stormwater system would provide stormwater calculations, which was done with the village at Flat Hill, but it was done at a time that the state didn't have mandatory items that would be included. And currently, an appendix to all stormwater reports is an operation and maintenance plan. And that's not something that was done in the mid-90s. They didn't include it. So we wanted to make sure that we went through all of the records to make sure that there was something that indicated maintenance requirements, and the approval certainly does that, and it's done in a way that it requires that they do it over time. And again, it's a relatively simple thing if it's kept up with. When it's not kept up with, it's not that it's difficult. I think they're at a point where it's I don't want to say it's simple or hard, but it's not. They're not recreating the basin. They're more re-grooming it and just ensuring that it functions properly.
Any questions, comments?
So was there any recommendation to correct the water flow, or are we just saying it's not something that we should be addressing because it's private property, or?
It certainly appears to me that Flat Hill Road conveys water from a private property. We're looking to address a potential issue that was identified on private property that my department would have some ability to impact. As far as what the solution within Flat Hill Road is, I certainly don't want to speak for the DPW director, but it doesn't appear as though this water is being generated on Flat Hill Road, right. And it's not coming from a town property. So, I wonder out loud what precedent gets set if the town looks to correct private water issues that it is a party to being impacted by, right. As a way to make them go away. I can't imagine that this is the only instance in town where a private property impacts both the town and other private properties. And once the town attacks it, I would wonder out loud what would happen the next time, and sure. The time after that, and what the long-term fiscal impact would be.
Mr. Adequins.
Yeah, Jack Rodquins, DBW Director. Very well articulated by Mr. Burney. He didn't trudge up into the woods, but I did. And I can tell you definitively, I cannot tell you definitively where the water comes from, originates, but I can tell you definitively that it does not come from a town property. If I could expand a little on the retention basins, excellent description. As you know, when these basins are installed, It's multifaceted, it's the size, the length, the width, the depth, and maybe more important, the material and the leaching component of what's in the bottom of the basin. What happens to these basins over time is it organics, the birds and the bees, and the organics, the leaves, vegetate, cat o' nine tails you see often, so it totally skews the numbers of the perk rate. But to a greater degree, it's the water that's coming from, and whether it originates in the project, we don't know, but it's certainly coming, as you saw in that first slide, in a pretty good-sized brook right along the border of the Flat Hill project and the private property. The private property, over this course of time, when this was in question, was subdivided. There's a front lot and a rear lot, and a small access was left to get into the rear lot. The downhill home that was impacted, the impact changed, and I found out that the impact changed because, in one respect, because the new owner in the front, beautiful old farmhouse, but had to put in a new septic system. Very wet area, as is obvious, so the septic system was quite high. And there's some trenching around the back of the system to keep this water away from it. But what that low spot does is gather all the water, all that water that's in the back, kind of has eyes for that low spot, gets into that low spot, comes around the catch basin, and enters Flat Hill Road, which is what you saw here. So I don't have a solution. Spent a lot of time on this, and I would just caution the board to look at a town-funded solution, because I think what we have here, and I had another slideshow, but we didn't enter it here. They're taking a number of pictures over the years where water from private property is coming on to the public way. And if in the public way, the drainage, the collection system that's on the public way, if it were just for water on the road, we would be in even better shape. But it's instances like this all throughout town where water from private property impacts our system, impacts the edge of the road, deteriorates the subsurface of the road, and the town pays a hefty price for that. And the town is, this sort of exemplifies that. So it's from private property, impacting private property. If we could we ask for the legal opinion? Would it be appropriate, Mr. Chairman? Mr. Cost?
You want to weigh in?
Well, we asked, because we wanted to cover all our bases here.
Through you, Mr. Chairman. So I have had an opportunity to speak to the land use director and the DPW director and gotten generally familiar with the circumstances. I tend to be a fairly unpopular person among the taxpayers when I say this, but when I get asked questions about responsibilities of municipalities, as a lawyer, I think of the responsibilities in terms of liabilities, right? So the question is the town liable? Responsible in the sense of liability as a consequence of what's occurring here. There are remedies, private remedies, that taxpayers have, residents have, property owners have when an adjacent property owner is doing something on his or her or their property that results in water being conveyed from that private property onto another private property. Sometimes it's directly from one private property to another. Sometimes it's across an intervening roadway that might be a public roadway, might be owned by a municipality. There are instances where the town is truly responsible, liable, because the town owns the source of the water. Something that the town has done on its own property has resulted in water being conveyed onto private property. There are circumstances where a municipality has made certain improvements to a public way that have resulted in a certain pitch, a design that results in the conveyance of water, usually in storm events, onto a private property. And those circumstances, my answer to you is yes, there's a liability here, and the town needs to be mindful of that, and I recommend in those circumstances that the town do what it can to find the funding to remedy the situation, because if you don't, Number one, you face liability from the property owner who's affected by the water. Number two, there are sort of secondary liabilities. What happens if the water is conveyed onto an adjacent property owner's driveway and it freezes and there's a motor vehicle accident? There's secondary liability there too. What I understand, and again, I've done no independent investigation of my own, but what I understand from these gentlemen and the conversations that I've had with them is that, and you just heard it said yourself, this is not a circumstance where the source of water is a municipal source. The source of water isn't really determined yet, but you've heard it stated definitively that it's not a municipal source. Whether that's a consequence of a particular project, and it doesn't sound like it necessarily is here, whether that's the consequence of simply additional development in a particular area of town that results in additional impervious surfaces and therefore more water runoff. It's from private property, it's onto other private property, it just so happens you've got an intervening roadway. So from a liability perspective, I can say that the town's not liable and the town therefore has no responsibility. Now that, again, easy for me to say. I'm not the politician, and so that's in your hands to decide where you spend municipal funds. And obviously you've got to weigh the different factors. You certainly have the right, if you were to so choose, to do an additional investigation to find the basis for the source of the flooding that's occurring and try to do what you can do within the town's financial situation to find a remedy. But you also heard it said tonight, and I can tell you, representing other municipalities, I've experienced it too, this occurs throughout the Commonwealth. And I suspect that this road is not the only road in Lunenburg where you've got this situation occurring. So what are the immediate consequences? What are the long-term consequences? How severe is this situation compared to others? You heard reference made to precedent. I tend to be a bit less concerned about precedent. Again, easy for me to say. It's really, relatively speaking, how severe is this situation compared to the others that just tend to exist probably on public roadways throughout the town? And is it something that there's some prudence in investing in a solution now because it could have long-term effects and long-term costs for the town in terms of deterioration of a roadway, for example?
So that's assuming that we would do the work, but do we have the authority to order a landowner to remedy the water that's coming on our property?
Well, you do in certain circumstances. So coming onto your property, yes, you could certainly bring an action against a private property owner, the municipality could, for the conveyance of water from a private property onto the town roadway. It sounds to some extent like the problem isn't just or principally the water on the roadway, it's also the water that is traversing the roadway and ends up on the other side. You certainly would not have a cause of action on behalf of that other property owner for the water that finds its way onto his or her or their property. In circumstances where new development has been permitted, and a good example is this explanation of stormwater management standards and the fact that they have morphed into something quite different today than they were 10 years ago, let alone 20 or 30 years ago, with newer projects where you've got stormwater management systems that were part of permitting decisions. You can enforce those permitting decisions, and that's what you're attempting to do here, or your building commissioner is attempting to do through this proposed letter that'll be sent, to require maintenance of stormwater retention or detention basins, which may assist in remedying the problem. But I think what I heard is that they're probably not going to remedy the problem entirely. In fact, they may not even make a significant dent in the problem. Short of that, short of having a permitting decision that requires stormwater management, requires an operation and maintenance plan, you don't have the right, other than by bringing an action against a party for intentional conveyance of water, you don't have the right to take action against private property owners. And again, in many instances, it's not anything that the private property owner has intentionally done. It could even be a source that's beyond the immediate private property owner. It could be a source that's 2, 3, 4 properties away, and it's just the consequence of additional development in the area, additional impervious surface, greater stormwater runoff, and it's finding its way across multiple properties where it didn't gather before and onto the public roadway.
So I understand the legal part, but I think this is going to be something that the town's going to be facing. We've faced it in the past, and we've put drainage in various places on various streets in order to deal with the various things. The trouble is now, instead of the old straight chute, let's put the stormwater into the Hickory Hills Lake, which is what, when they put those roads, that where the drainage did was a straight pipe. That's not what we do anymore, but I think this is going to be something that's probably going to need I hate to say it, another subcommittee or a group that needs to be charged with this, because this is going to happen more and more. Climate change is talking about additional storms. The Conservation Commission, Jack Rabbit shared a video of additional storm water impacts on properties, on streams that may be seasonal, may become further an issue of going on. So I think that we need to get the letter out, get the homeowners association, get that fixed up, see if that reduces it 10, 15%. It's something. I think we need to investigate that property that had the septic system put in that met the Board of Health requirements for difference from the water treatment. But if there was some trenching that was done that was going to redirect the flow, then that may have to be dealt with separately as well. They may have to be ordered to do something differently. I think this is going to be a multifaceted situation. I agree the town should not be putting drainage in to resolve a private issue, but this is going to be affecting Flat Hill Road going forward, let alone the residents. So I don't have an answer to it other than, because part of the thing is, say we do put 20-inch pipes all the way down Flat Hill, where's it going to go? Lake Shirley. So you can't just put it into Lake Shirley, so you're going to have another detention basin. I looked at the GIS map. The back of the Cortlandt Street properties goes to the swamp behind Arbor Street. So the water is going everywhere, and then that brings the houses along Page Street. So if you had an additional work there. So I'm not saying we shouldn't have development, but the impacts of development are going to be affecting what we need to do, and it's going to be a multi-pronged approach.
Please.
Hi, Greg Bittner, 32 Sandy Cove Road. I'm also the chair of planning. So this was brought to my attention through residents and through one of your meetings. We asked Mr. Burney to research what we could do about it because it was our decision. He gave us the information, and we can only act upon and enforce what's written into our decision. So that's what prompted our recommendation to get the building inspector involved. Moving forward, I know this doesn't help this current situation, but we need to tighten up our decisions. On Northfield Road, we've written decisions where they actually have, I don't think they're deed restrictions, but they're notes on the deed that the property owners are responsible for their own detention basins. So we did what we could. I know it's no consolation to the abutters at this point, but we're bound by what's in our decisions. So thank you.
Thank you.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
When was this first reported? Like, how far back does this go? Like, the water problem, when was it first brought to the town's attention or someone's attention for the first time? In correlation to...
The first consideration was at a meeting, I remember clearly, when the project was about to be accepted. There was concern about the redirection of the water. There was also concern about that retention basin that was right on the edge of Flat Hill Road. And that was, when was that, Mrs. Whalen? 2002. 2002.
So that's when the concern about accepting it was the concern because the need for maintenance or because there was already water starting to flow on the street?
Just a concern for the overall development at that point. I mean, it was new, it had just been accepted, it was about to be accepted, and there was concern of the neighbors that it would do, in essence, what it does now. They were worried about flooding coming from the development onto their property.
So I would go back to town council and saying that if we could prove, however we could prove that this development is causing this water, does the town have the right to order them to remedy the water that's coming off of their property onto the town's property?
The town has some ability to do that. Some of that authority is a product of what the decision says. I haven't had occasion to review the full decision. I've seen the letter that's been written and the provisions of the decision that are quoted in the letter. They speak to maintenance of these detention basins as a component of a stormwater management system. I've litigated cases like this, and the question becomes, what was presented to the board? Did the board have a fair opportunity to vet it, to review it with its own consultant, inside or outside? And what did that consultant determine? I can tell you that there's no liability on the part of the town, but that's not to say that the town doesn't have the right or even the obligation to pursue the property owner or the developer. The challenge, again, in my experience, particularly with these older developments, is that the developer's long gone usually. And so you're going after the association, and the association of homeowners didn't design the system. And, they've not done anything wrong except inherit a system that maybe wasn't designed correctly to begin with, or was designed correctly, but is just handling much more water than what was anticipated. So really what you've got to do is you've got to dredge up the old records, review what was presented to the board, review what sort of a review that the board conducted at the time, and then based upon what you find, determine whether there's some basis to argue that misrepresentations were made, that the water that was anticipated at that time isn't exactly what's ended up gathering on site or off site, and see whether there's any basis to go back against either the developer or the association now.
In the following part is whether there could be sort of the gradual nuisance creation, that whether it's let's assume that everything was designed properly and we can get these detention ponds and that reduces a certain amount, but if there's still additional water coming from that development that wasn't there initially, do we have the right to say you still have to fix this?
Probably not with the development that's quite this old, but I don't want to say that definitively without reviewing the decision and seeing what happened and when it all happened. By today's standards, your pre and your post development runoff have to essentially be the same, or you can certainly reduce runoff, but usually you don't. But you can't have any post development runoff in excess of what the pre-development conditions were. That wasn't the standard prior to the current version of the Mass Stormwater Handbook. So we'd have to look back and see what the standards were at the time and whether they were compliant with those standards at that time. And that would sort of dictate what rights we have today.
I would ask a question. There's some in the letter that wasn't sent out yet. It does say that the project would be developed, constructed, and maintained in accordance. So it maybe seems more like a planning board thing, but if there's something in there that says they were supposed to maintain something, wouldn't they need to maintain it?
And that's what I was speaking to earlier as far as the detention basin goes. It appears that the bottom of the basin, or the bottom of the bowl, which is what the basin has some muck in it. So it's 12, 18, 36 inches taller than it should be. And oftentimes that's organic material, leaves and whatnot, that turns into compost. It becomes very thick and silty and essentially clogs the bottom and prevents the infiltration from happening at the rate that it should. That's not to say that they can't fix that relatively easily. I don't know if that corrects the issue. I don't honestly believe that it does, and I think what is being represented is that the basin is inadequate or improperly designed in respect to the amount of water that goes into it. And so the flow rates that are coming out of it are greater than it can handle and that the discharge area can handle, so it all spills into the road. It's really hard to go back 25 years and say, well, this person who's now deceased had this engineer who may or may not still be in business, and they designed this project that is now a problem, or it was brought to someone's attention and it wasn't really a problem, and now it's gotten to the point where it's untenable. I wasn't involved up until 6 or 8 weeks ago, so I was unaware how long it went on. My understanding and what was stated at a planning board meeting is the previous planning director was told about it and said, well, it's not my problem, go talk to the DPW. So I think it sort of got foisted over to the DPW, and generally they're not in the habit or have the authority to go and knock on private development's door and say, you've got this approval, you need to follow it. So I think that there's a lot of history to it that needs to be unfolded.
Personally, I'd be in favor of, pursuing the maintenance aspect of it sounds like that probably won't fix the problem, though. And I would be opposed to going after the residents of the new neighborhood to make them do any other remedial action for something that they weren't responsible for, and they just kind of inherited the situation. I'd have a hard time doing that.
And that's why I talked about the whole town, this being an issue that will be ongoing. The question then becomes whether the downstream property owners have a right of nuisance lawsuit against the property owners. So if it's not the town enforcing it, the private owners may end up doing that. I know we did that with a property off of Lawton Avenue behind Aubuchon. There was issue of somebody took down trees legally, and that created a greater flow, which then created more water in the neighbors, and it wasn't on town property, the town didn't do it, and our official answer was, we can't do anything, you have the right of suit. Hopefully this will address it to an extent, but if, part of the discussion becomes the maintenance, I'm assuming that there'll be some supervision by the planning board that that they are certifying that the maintenance is being done properly. I wouldn't say that you'd certify it, but I would expect that they would certify that they've at least fixed it. And I have no idea whether they could, you probably can't make it deeper because there's a water table anyways, but this is a tough situation, but we're going to be facing it more and more in town.
Yeah, does the water damage the road, and does it cause, like, frost heaving? Because that would be the part that is our problem.
Yeah, it was brought up a number of weeks ago that there was a concern by a member of the board and a resident of the area that the road was cracking all along that side where you saw that water running. I mean, water and asphalt are not a good combination. So water on top of asphalt with a continual pounding of traffic just separates the aggregate. Water running down the gutter with no berm and no drainage does even more damage because it goes below the asphalt surface and undermines the subsurface or the substructure of the road. So yes.
Okay, so it's not a private property to private property issue if we're one of the properties affected by it.
We are, and just to continue on, I've been there at times of, after high rains, and during high rains, or heavy rains rather, and high water table, and the amount of water coming, overflowing this particular basin right near Flat Hill, and that's the only one I saw, was a pittance compared to the water that was running down that you saw in the initial slide. So it's consistent with with the discussion here that yes, it probably should be maintained, but I believe that it's a small part, unless there's something in the rear of the development that I didn't inspect that's draining water onto the adjacent property, and then it's flowing from the adjacent property to the road.
So the last thing is, do we have the right to ask the homeowners association to investigate where the water is flowing on their property and how it gets to the town?
From or to? Where it's flowing from or where it's flowing to? I didn't understand your question.
Yeah, I guess because I didn't know what I was saying. So it's a little bit of like, what's the source of the water, and is it beyond the development coming onto their property is one thing. And if it's all located on their property and it's going into detention ponds that can't hold it, we'd want them to find that out. So.
Oh, good, the slide's still up. If you look at it, there's two small roads that come off of Cortlandt Circle. Alder, and it's another type of tree. Willow, okay. I was gonna say chestnut, so I'm glad I didn't, because chestnut's over here. But they're sort of so right where Jack's finger is sort of the crest. And those roads flow to the back, towards Page Street, towards that large open. You kind of go up the hill and it sort of levels off a little bit and it tapers back. So there's two basins in the back that handle that flow, and there's 2 basins in the front that handle the other flow. So the water, if it's coming onto our road, is coming from those 2 basins. They are designed with an outlet structure, which is essentially just a big pipe that has an orifice on one side and an orifice on the other side, and it comes in, it drops out, and it flows, and it's supposed to spread out and infiltrate. And that's functionally what it's doing. There's swampy areas on that side that are taking the water. Again, they're heavily wooded. There's a lot of leaf cover. There would have to be a lot of water in these basins for them to be pushing a significant volume out. I haven't been over there in the sort of rains that Jack has been over there in, but he seems to be confident that they're minimal compared to the other conveyance.
So the other, getting into the weeds here,
Literally.
the houses with gutters and downspouts do we know if any of those downspouts are tied to the catch basins within the development and they're adding additional water?
I would have to review it. Generally, that's not how they design it. Being that it was designed in the 90s, if they have gutters, they probably just daylight onto the grass. And for the most part, I mean, they have a pretty nice landscaping, pretty collectively over there. There's, you don't have a lot of hardscaping. There's not a lot of dead grass. So you're not going to get a ton of, it's not going to be a deluge. It's going to slow down. It's going to infiltrate. If the water table's high, that's another story, but
I was just talking because I know the sewer department went through a smoke testing where they
for the I&I.
To see if the water was coming in as another. I'm just looking at all the different.
Sure, and I mean it's certainly possible. What I would suspect more likely would be foundation drains, where they put the drains around the foundation and they pipe them right into the nearest catch basin. That's done in so many places, and it's clean water because it's groundwater. So most places allow that sort of thing, and it's not. The amount of water that it produces, I don't think generally is as significant as the rain itself. Certainly, if the basins aren't designed for that and you have hundreds of them, it could overflow it. But the water here is relatively spread out, and again, I'm not an engineer, so I don't want to say it's definitively not causing it, but it's again not uncommon, and it's something that you see in a lot of different places.
All right, it would seem to me at the very minimum we support the sending of the letter and the activity of cleaning out the basins. I think that the planning board has checked in terms of their being aware of this for future development. I think that Mr. Ebersol's suggestion that perhaps the Stormwater Task Force or some sub-task force can look at the impact of water flow, whether it's new or as a result of some previous development, has an impact on the town's infrastructure, its roads, etc. Certainly the outflow of where this water goes when it goes wherever it goes is of import to our environment. And so I guess the Conservation Commission, in conjunction with the Stormwater Task Force, has a place to check in. But at this point, I think that's the activity right now, and that we ask that those various groups, stormwater, conservation, planning, be more aware of this and see if the cleaning up does any improvement.
And I would say we need to continue documenting this and other places where water is running on the floor, on the roads.
Yes. Please, at the podium.
Susan Whalen, 377 Flat Hill Road. I spoke before the Board of Selectmen earlier and brought it to their attention. I understand that the whole purpose, the goal of the town is to control the water on the roads. And I guess one of the concerns that I have is the fact that if you're going to pave the road and you have all this water coming down, the road is not going to last very long. So that's one thing. Nobody today has addressed the issue of the big pond and wetland at the highest elevation in the middle of Cortlandt Circle. I took a truck up there and walked, and there is a sizable pond that's been there with wetlands around it. Whether that is a source of the water, I do not know, but it's something to look at. And then another question that's come up is the water seems to be coming down into that undeveloped lot at 252 Flat Hill Road, which is what Jack had mentioned. But that water is coming from someplace else. That lot has not always been flooded, from my understanding. And the last thing I want to comment on is there a possibility that an engineering firm could be brought in to evaluate the whole situation? Because it seems as though, I don't think that there's all that water that's coming down through the 252 and 268 Flat Hill Road. Why isn't it going to the detention ponds? Does anyone have a...
So interpreting that, I guess the question is there a break in the drainage?
Well, I can address that in, well, all of those points, I guess. So the Cortlandt Circle does, it's almost a horseshoe, but it's got a little hoop on the end. And you can see there's a large green parcel with a really bright white letter in the middle of it. That's the pond that Mrs. Whalen's talking about. That existed on the site prior to the development. So again, what's been said about additional impervious area, raising water table, dumping stormwater, it could be collecting at that site and could be coming off. Again, this would be part of, if the town chooses to do this, further investigation as to what was presented to the planning board. But that wasn't a created pond. If you look through the series of aerials over the last 15 to 16 years, the pond changes annually. Some years it's a little smaller, some years it's a little bigger. I mean, I think especially around here, people are sensitive to the fact that water bodies in droughts have significant impact. I mean, half the town lives on either Hickory Hills or Lake Shirley and has dealt with what it's like in a dry year when the lake gets really low. But it doesn't seem significantly larger in any visual measure than it has been over the years. As to the reason that the water coming from 252 Flat Hill Road isn't entering the drainage system is it's not part of the development. The development moves around it, and that drainage system is collecting the impervious area within the development. It's not collecting undeveloped area. So rain that falls on the streets is riding the crown to the gutter line into the catch basins. It's being conveyed by pipes to the low points, which are the detention ponds. So in order for any of that water from 252 to make it into that drainage system, they'd have to, A, determine whether or not the basins they have could adequately contain and infiltrate that water, and they'd have to find a way to get it there, which would involve a series of probably easements and pipes and a catch basin of some manner.
But doesn't it make sense that the water is coming from the higher elevation and that is a lower elevation?
Yes, that makes sense. I guess I don't understand there was too many pronouns in there for me to follow. The water is coming from a higher elevation. What's a lower elevation? 252 or the detention basement?
252.
Potentially. Again, I'm going to continue to say I'm not an engineer. I know enough to be dangerous, but water does flow over ground. There's also things that are called perched water tables. So if there's a hard pan, whether it's clay or some sort of rock or bedrock, something like that, the water will sit on top of it, and it can rise up to above the ground if it gets too full. And if there's more runoff or there's more rain than there has been, that water table can hold more water. There could be a spring. It could be all overland flow. I don't want to say what it is because I don't know.
Thank you.
Thank you. The other members of the Board of Selectmen have this.
Thank you. That's also in the Google Drive.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, just
Yes.
one comment. I just want to be clear on the paving, since Mrs. Whalen brought it up again, and it was brought up before, that what's there for pavement is what we call, and I think you've all come to know as a leveler course. And what I've done, and you see a good example of it on Lancaster Ave, the potholes, the defects are just so close and so long a span that, and that had been crack sealed, is that it really doesn't make a lot of sense to fill potholes. What makes more sense financially and structurally is to put that scrape leveler or that leveler across. What it does is it makes it just, a lot better for everybody that's traveling along the road, for snow removal. We expect, I've left some of those levelers for as long as 2 years because they don't come up in the program, yet the road had to be repaired somehow. I'm not concerned with what's happening there, but there is a concern that what's going to happen with the finished pavement. Well, I can tell you, as I stand here, that there will be no finished pavement there until this is resolved, because we just can't allow that. Just to be clear in everybody's mind. Okay?
Thank you. Greg's got another question.
Hi, Greg Bittner, 32 Sandy Cove Road, Chair of Planning. So basically, we have the ability written into the bylaw to do a periodic review of any project. I think that, I know the abutter had suggested possibly employing a peer review of the project. I know it's far after the fact, but we're willing to accept any recommendation from yourselves or from Jack or from anybody else if that falls under our purview, because it is the permit that we issued, so, as far as the planning board goes. So I just think somebody needs to take the reins. If it's a planning board, we're happy to do that, so whatever. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other comment or question?
More information to come.
Right. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. Okay. We have no interviews, appointments, or reappointments. Is that correct? Town manager report?
The land use director, Adam Burney, and I had a meeting with Mass Development on May 17th to discuss the possible funding available for Phase 1 and Phase 2 assessments through Mass Development's Brownfield Site Assessment Program for 925 Massachusetts Ave. The first step in the process is to work with Town Council to seek a right to access the property from the court. And once that is granted, we would work with Mass Development on applying for funding under the Site Assessment Program and submit an application using a scope of work done by a licensed site professional for a Phase 1 site assessment. And after that is complete, we would apply for a Phase 2 site assessment. After the Phase 2 site assessment is done, the town could apply for Brownfield's remediation program funds. And if the town's goal is redevelopment of that property, we would be eligible for cleanup funds that essentially would be repaid to Mass Development by a contribution of 15% of future tax collections from the successful redevelopment of that property. As we move forward in gaining access to the property through the court, if that's the course we're going to take, Mass Development is going to research whether there are available funds in an account created under Mass General Law, Chapter 21J, that establishes an underground storage tank petroleum product cleanup fund that allows owners of properties such as this to access these funds if they had paid into the account through tank registration fees. The land use director is going to take the lead on working with Town Council on access to the property and working with Mass Development to begin the process of assessment from this point on. It is my recommendation that the Selectmen work with the Planning Board and the future Economic Development Committee and other interested stakeholders to discuss the future of the use of that property, and that will help guide us in the process of assessment and remediation. The Summer Street project. The DPW director attended the pre-construction meeting for the Summer Street Road reconstruction project last week, and the survey work for the project has begun this week. The contractor will be storing materials during the project on the land adjacent to the old landfill on Youngs Road. The treasure collector will be conducting a tax lien sale auction on June 13th at 1 p.m. Approximately 28 tax liens will be advertised to auction their tax lien. The highest bidder purchasing the liens will be required to pay the back taxes, penalties, interest, and keep the taxes current. This does not transfer the ownership of the property to the new lien holder, but the owner will be required to pay them the delinquent taxes or be subject to foreclosure by the new lien holder. Up until the date of the auction, the property owners can set up a payment plan with the treasurer or pay the delinquent taxes in full to fully redeem the property. Already, the treasurer collector has been contacted to set up payment plans, and one owner paid off an amount of approximately $64,000 today. The current total of delinquent taxes, interest, penalties accrued for these tax title properties is approximately $685,000. The skateboard park. A sign permit to advertise the future site of the skate park, as well as how much has been fundraised, was approved, and the DPW director and school facilities director will identify the spot next to Kids Kingdom to erect the sign. Mr. Gregory Roy of Ducharme and Dillis Civil Design Group will begin the survey work within the next couple of weeks. And just notification, I will be attending a mandatory recertification class to maintain my Chief Procurement Officer designation on June 4th and 5th, so I'll be out of the office.
Okay. Minutes, we have minutes from April 17th. Warrants, one warrant. It's accounts payable warrant in the amount of $374,297.24. Any action file issues?
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up from topic from pretty long ago. The primary school building, there was concern that that was a 40R property, and at some point in time, we said it was just a matter of some paperwork to remove that designation. I would be interested, whether or not the whole rest of the board would be interested in getting rid of that 40R designation, because I know there are citizens who have serious concerns about that being there, and that impacts our future use of that property.
Does the land use director know whether it's a 40R for sure? Because I've heard differing opinions on that. And remind us, please, what a 40R is.
Two numbers and a letter. So 40R is a designation under Mass General Law. It's kind of like 40B, but not really. It allows the town to create a specific district to meet housing and potentially retail or other commercial goals. I don't believe that there's a formal designation on that site. I would have to confirm that, but you've all seen the recent applications of Tri-Town Estates for a modification to their project. You'll recall that within the zoning bylaw, there's a Tri-Town Estates zoning district, which is a requirement of 40Rs that you create a specific zoning district for the 40R development that dictates how it works. So that parcel is not zoned in any specific way other than village district, but I'll have to go back through my records and see what designations were made and signed, but I'm relatively confident that it is not a designated district. I don't know if there was perhaps a commitment to the potential developer that should the funding come through, the town was interested in it and would put forth the 40R designation through town meeting. But right now, it's just zoned for the village.
It's tough to find a negative certification. Something
Yes.
is not something. But if you can pull out the folder on that too.
I'll look through our 40R stuff. I'm
Yeah.
sure that I have a box somewhere in the attic.
And that, I don't know if we've got anything on that project when we approved it, when it was turned over to us, whether there's any in the folder, just whether that information about we would apply for it.
I mean,
It'd be
I
good to
can
clear it
certainly
up.
see, unless the planning board approved it, I'm not necessarily hopeful that I would have something. But I've found stranger things in the old files upstairs, so I'll certainly take a look through it.
It'd just be nice to be able to say definitively that it's.
That's right.
not.
I agree.
And if it's there, then it's whatever we need to do
Sure.
to remove it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I guess just as a follow-on to that, maybe I can ask town council to help us to, if we can't find anything, what do we have to do to be able to definitively say that it doesn't exist?
So I've got a fair amount of experience with 40R, so I'll offer a comment. So all 40R districts and any site that would be subject to 40R zoning would require DHCD approval prior to town meeting vote. So the simplest thing to do is contact the Department of Housing and Community Development and find out whether they have a record of a 40R designation. If they have none, then you don't have a 40R overlay on that site.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Hi, Todd Dwyer, 361 Mopus Road. To add to this discussion, I just checked to Google, and there's 204 40R units in Lunenburg, and that's the Tri-Town development. And that's based on the maps provided online.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any committee reports? We're going to talk about future agendas, and I think at part of our organization meeting, we'll be talking about committee assignments. The only input I have is that I do know that the Finance Committee is meeting this week on Thursday, and one of their discussions is with the fire chief to talk about the longer-term staffing strategy, paramedic strategy, et cetera, in light of the town meeting decisions. So that's the first of discussions. Our plan is to have a joint meeting with finance as they progress through that and talk about the longer-term strategy on paramedic.
And just to clarify, the fire chief will not be at that meeting.
Right.
It will just be preliminary discussions about
Right.
that.
Right, I'm sorry. That is correct. Let's see. In terms of our upcoming schedule, we do not meet next week. We will meet next on June 5th. We will have our organization discussion at that meeting. I'd ask members of the board to think about the various committees that selectmen are represented on, and if you represent us, whether you want to continue in that role. I'd like to talk at our goal workshop, which is scheduled for the 12th, about the liaison positions, and maybe we can make that part of that discussion. So our next meeting is June 5th. And before I ask the Conservation Commission to convene and discuss going into executive session, is there any public comment from the public? Please.
Thanks. I'll make this quick. Mina Schulten, 3 Oak Avenue. I'm on the Cultural Council, and I'm just here to just formally, or almost formally, invite you all to attend all of the selectmen, and of course, a town manager to attend the Lunenburg Arts Festival coming up on Saturday, June 9th, 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Also, folks watching at home, just reminding you all that this event is coming up in town. So we just would be honored if you would help us support and celebrate the North Central Massachusetts creative community by attending the first annual Lunenburg Arts Festival. It'll feature an artisan marketplace, music and dance performances, a children's craft tent, a community art project, and food from the Turkey Hill Lions Club. The festival represents a true community collaboration coming to fruition through the work of volunteers, municipal partnership, and local business support. So we hope you can all come, bring your friends and families, and hope to see you there. And folks can visit the website at www.lunenburgartsfestival.com for all kinds of information about the festival. And you'll all be getting invitations in your mailboxes at some point in the near future, so take a peek for those. Thanks.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other public comment? Public comment from the board? Okay.
I do. Sorry.
Sure.
Thank you. I don't want to stop doing comments altogether, so, and I don't have to introduce myself, so that's great. I just wanted to say, as far as the 40R designation of that property, it only matters if it's private property, and right now it's municipal land, and I see a vision of it staying municipal land as a potential town green, so we don't even have to worry about its designation so long as we keep it.
Okay. Mr. Chairman, would you like to call your meeting to order?
Yes, I'll call a Conservation Commission meeting for May 22nd to order.
Thank you. Can I have a motion to enter executive session under Mass General Law, Chapter 30, Section 21, Reason 6, to consider the purchase, exchange, lease, or value of real property if the chair declares that an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the negotiating position of the public body. And we're going to discuss 161 Gilchrist Street, Assessors May 31, Parcel 10, and 171 Gilchrist Street, Assessors Map 31, Parcel 11, not to return to public session.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor, Mrs. Adams? Aye. Mr. McQuaid?
Aye.
Mr. Evasol?
Aye.
And aye for myself.